Okay, good evening. This is July 29th, 2017, and this is episode 4 of Testigo, Venezuela, which is a project ongoing for as long as it's going to take. Probably one of the most underreported stories going on in the world today. In the United States, we don't really hear about it much. We're more interested in, fight or whatever is going on with a certain family over in. Meanwhile, one of the most important oil exporters in the world is basically going through a crisis that I think, based on the other episodes, was pretty avoidable. And it's affecting people of all belief systems and opinion grounds and racial groups and religious groups there. It's causing a major refugee crisis that's not talked about here in the States and won't be talked about until it directly affects us. Although technically it is affecting us already, as we're probably going to discuss a little tonight. So the guest today is Carlos Cordova. Say hi.
Hi.
You're in California, right?
Yeah.
Carlos, why don't you tell us a little about what you do now, how you came to live where you are, and what's your connection to Venezuela?
Yeah. Hi. Hi, my name is Carlos. As he pointed out, I live currently in California, and I was born and raised in Venezuela. I was born in '92, and I lived in Venezuela. I went to primary school, high school, the whole way. And after I finished my high school, I started doing studies abroad, and at the end, it brought me all the way to Southern California into 2010. So I lived in Venezuela from since I was born until 2010. It was about 11 years after Chavez took office, and then and then I started my studies here in Southern California. I graduated, and now I'm currently living here. So that's kind of where I come from. The main reason I moved here was my family was personally affected from the regime, uh, mainly after a list of people that voted on a referendum got public. There was a lot of there was a lot of uh, persecution for those people, mainly in the workplace. So whenever you know close family members who go try to get a job, the list will go up, and if they were on the list, meaning that they voted against the government, they were not able to work. So that kind of made things a lot harder to stay over there. So
So
this is
this principle we have in America, which I don't know if it's in the past. I don't know if it's really being held to, is that we have a secret ballot, meaning that if I voted for, let's say, Gary Johnson here, they can't reveal it. Election Commission can't reveal it to my job. Otherwise, it's actually a felony.
yeah.
So you're saying in Venezuela, basically don't have that principle, at least not in recent years. They just say, hey, this family,
Well,
they have this group of people, and they're opposing us. Is that basically what you're saying?
well, okay. So first of all, let's be clear. This was not a normal electoral process. This was a referendum. So I don't know what are the constitutional protections on the referendum. I would in Venezuela, but it's a special process because to have a recall referendum. By the way, recall referendum is if you want to have presidential elections before the next presidential election, right? If you have
Right.
so there's a process. There's a process, and there's levels of signatures you have to get. I believe there's about 25% of signatures you need or so from the
Mhm.
electorate to call a referendum. So there is a process before the election that it involves collecting signatures. All right. So that was collected. I believe it was 2006. I can't remember a specific date, but it was early 2000s. So that was collected, and then the recall referendum happened. It was a huge, election, and Chavez stayed in power by a very minimum margin. It was single digit. So, anyways, I don't know what are the constitutional protections on the first phase of the recall referendum, where you have those signatures, and then you recall referendum, or after. But yeah, I mean, in any case, I would expect some type of protection from the law in that case. That obviously was, overlooked. But ever since that was
that's kind of a thing that I've been seeing, that Venezuela was always convulsions. I think even more recently, I'm checking right now, but there was a referendum during one of the last years of Chavez's time in office, when he tried to approve a new constitution similar to what's going on tomorrow, which we're going to get to, where it would have expanded his powers, and it was actually voted down. So can you explain why is it that he was able to be thwarted at that attempt?
Okay, so when I'm talking about recall referendum is a different election.
Right.
It happened I think a year before or after that one. Okay. That one was something similar to we see today, although it was started in a different way. All right, let me explain to you. So what happens in a constitutional amendment, when you want to have a constitutional assembly, right? You have to get a certain amount of people to get together and formulate a constitution, right? What happened when Chavez did is that he took a lot of that process to himself. Although he did have lobbied from different NGOs and different independent organizations, most of it, and he talks about it himself, most of it was written by himself, his own pen. He talks about it. He admits it. So what happened then was that in that constitutional assembly that he was doing, because what happens is that you have a constitutional assembly where you have a group of people that decide what the constitution is going to be, and then you have a referendum about the results of that assembly. Okay, that's what's happening right now. So what happened is, what you were talking about is the referendum that happened after the constitutional after the assembly, which was mainly just one person. But again, let's be accurate. There were other people involved. Now, what happened in that is that they had a list of laws that, like you said, they were empowering him. One of the laws were indefinite re-election. They had a law where you can redistrict. He was basically doing some type of gerrymandering on the whole country. He was having some type of powers over how to nationalize different private industries. I can't recall the whole thing, but those were the main things. Okay, what happened was a lot of the things, in that constitutional amendment that they were going to do did not bode well for his own people, and he lost that. That was his first election loss, and I can't recall.
2007.
Yeah, 2007. That was his first election loss. But this is the thing, all right? He lost that, but he found ways to get around that. And the thing is, around that time, there was an assembly election, just like that in 2015, where you get the deputies, you elect the deputies to assembly, right? Assemblies are Congress, right? We have no Senate. By the way, he was the one who abolished the Senate. We used to have a Senate. But anyways, we have an assembly, right? So you elect the deputies per region, right? So what happened around that time was that, and it's important to note, is that there was an assembly election where the opposition did not participate. And the reason that they did not participate on their term was that the electoral system was not confident enough to have an election. And therefore, we should not actually have elections, and therefore, we should not run candidates on the opposition. So obviously, what happened was that the assembly was taken over by the Chavistas, and
the PSUV.
Well, at
That's
that time it was a number of parties. Then it became the PSUV. By that time, it was MVR and like MPP, all
right.
these things. But anyways, the point is, the assembly was taking over, and this was the sole responsibility of the opposition. They had the big balls of saying, you know what, don't vote. All right, we're not gonna have any candidates, no vote. Let the Chavistas take over. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like the time. I
So
mean,
that's
these. Yeah.
that's like let's go a little further back.
Mhm.
So this is very interesting. I think I kind of forgot to talk about that topic with other guests, and I think we'll get to that again. So, talk a little about. You said your parents and family were involved in one of the referendum efforts to Chavez's time. I mean, you were 6 years old when he was elected. And was
Mhm.
your family originally in favor of the Chavez candidacy and his presidency, or did it kind of come as a real fear of theirs that he was even coming to power, like happened with a number of people as a pro-Chavez family, or was it kind of a process of getting disillusioned of him?
I can't remember. I can't remember. I have actually haven't talked about this with my parents. I don't know what they voted for in that year, and I can't remember that election. I mean, it was such a long time ago. By the way, I
So,
was 8. I was 8 when that happened. But yeah, I can't recall. I don't know if they were pro or against.
so what I've noticed is that, and I talked a little more with some of the other people I talked to. One of them I think is in his 30s. The other person is in his 50s, and they all remember that Chavez came into power and he was basically shaking up the system. You know, kind of like a lot of the candidates that last year, Sanders and Trump. You know, and it's this with a lot of people in the. I mean, you're in Southern California. There's the largest Venezuelan community in America is in Doral, Florida, right? But do you
Yeah.
have like a community around that are so you're kind of living apart from the general Venezuelan American community, right? Or
Hmm.
is it more? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is the what I see going on is basically this community is growing in the United States. There are pockets where it is becoming very you know, more dense, let's call it. But I think with the passage of time, if and you know, there's people who believe that this regime could fall at any time, but assuming that it doesn't, right? Because you can't going to happen in the next couple of days, even though tomorrow is a referendum. There are hundreds of thousands of people that have fled Venezuela. I've seen, you know, there was a report last week, I think, in the Daily Mail of Venezuelan women selling themselves in Colombia, earning more money than they did in Venezuela. Um, we're talking about this opposition. What happened after Chavez came to power? I do remember that there was a
Okay.
coup. I think it was in 2002 that
All right. So
failed.
let's put this in perspective. All right. It all started with in the early '90s. I think one of the other you know uh, Venezuelans that you interviewed actually mentioned this, but there was a candidate, I forgot the name was, but he ran for president in the early '90s. I think the election happened in the '89. I think it was somebody that used to be a president before, and he had good ratings. But anyways, I forgot what the name is. But anyways,
Carlos Andres Perez.
Carlos Perez, yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you look at his electoral campaign, all right, he was talking quasi Chavez. He was promising he was promising a time of bonanza, a time of great economic
Wealth.
bonanza in the country. It was very inspiring for the people in Venezuela, having seen that the economy was not going so well. Okay. So what happened is that he rallied up the people in early 90s, right? And then he came to power, and he completely reversed himself, and he went full on neoliberal. Like he went full on, like, yeah, sure, I'm gonna sign this. What was it? I'm gonna sign this South American trade agreement with the IMF that is gonna basically just, you know, not bode well for the common people in the Venezuela, right? So what happened is that a lot of things happened, but one of the main things I remember was that the transportation rates went up, right? And certain inflation was starting to peak, and people I think, and that's when the Caracazo happened. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you know about Caracazo.
Caracazo, so far as I found out, was this going on today, but you can describe it.
Yeah, but anyways, in simple terms, because I don't know too much about it, I don't want to sound like I know a lot about it, but basically, what it is that the people rose up, right? People from the barrios, the common people rose up, and because they in response to the policies of this new president, okay? And there was a lot of looting, and what happened next was, I think, the beginning of Chavismo. What happened next is that Marco Perez, well, I think was his name, Marco Jimenez or something, I forgot. But anyways, what happened was that he became really repressive with the people, and he started actually, you know, obviously there were looting happening, but the police became really repressive, and not only in Caracazo but also in further protests, you can see that people began to disappear. I mean, there were the so-called like death squads and all these things. By the way, those are actually real. You know, actually people disappeared and people died, and the only thing that they had again, it was that they were against the policies of this president, right? And these were the common people. This was the people that later, 10 years after, were you know, Chavistas, so people part of the PSUV. So what happened is that the 90s happened, right? The economy was going down, right? The inflation was going up. Things were not going well, and I think some of the people actually mentioned this. But it was boiling up from the early 90s, and that's when, by the way, in the early 90s, that's also when Chavez tried to stage a coup. He was arrested, then he was freed by another president in the mid-90s. But anyways, he was prisoner and he had freed everything. But anyways, all that started in the early 90s. Chavismo started in the 90s, and then when you see what, you know, I had to read this because I don't remember, but I read about it, what happened in '98. When Chavez ran, and like you said, it was another, you know, sign of hope, and you know, he was civil people, you know, a lot of people voted for him, and then he became president. But that's kind of how everything started, right? And it's kind of like a background of what Chavez happened.
Okay, so we've covered that before, and then there was the coup, I think, in 2002.
Okay, let's talk about that.
It was alleged that it was, and I think there's plenty of evidence, which I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the people that knew that Chavez was dragging the economy down. They had the military overthrow him, and despite the fact that they probably had a point that he was mismanaging the country a little at the time, he was just so popular at the time that they eventually released him and he became president again. So if we're talking about Carlos, who are the main people that have been opposing Chavez? There's this presidential candidate Capriles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me expand the coup, because the coup is something that it's a very polarized subject to talk about, because a lot of different things happen in the coup, right? And it's important to clarify those. Why did the coup happen? That's the first question people need to ask themselves when they talk about history on the 2002 and 2000 coup. So let's bring some background to the coup. What happened before the coup? Chavez, first of all, actually rewrote the Constitution. 1999, new Constitution came out. He started talking about decrees. He was He was given special powers to write laws in the 2000s. In 2000, I think 2001, he started these 49 decrees. If you Google it, you'll find it. But these 49 decrees that were himself by this law that was passed. Basically, the assembly agreed that to give him extra powers to write laws. Okay. One of the things that happened after these 49 decrees was that he nationalized, or he started moving over to national, taking to nationalize the oil company. That's when things started to do. Now, what happened is that one of the first things he did on those steps to nationalize the PDVSA was to fire the heads of PDVSA. Some of the main managers, he fired them. I mean, he fired them on TV. You can find this again on YouTube. How did Chavez fire the heads of PDVSA? So what happened is,
for those of you that are watching, haven't seen the other episodes, PDVSA is now it was always the largest oil company, but it is now the Venezuelan oil monopoly.
Yeah,
keep going.
Simple terms. But anyways, he fired the heads of the PDVSA, right? His point was, well, these people are corrupt. They're not taking the money for the people. They're taking the money from themselves. Some of it is true, okay? So, anyways, he fired these people, right? So what happens is that the culture of PDVSA was a meritocracy. It was a very strong meritocracy where if you're, to get to the, to the high levels, you have to work your way up, all these things, and then you'll get there. And it was actually like that. What happened was that when he took those people out, he put his own people in, okay? Making people that were, agree with him and were with him. And some of those people were coming up from down, and he just put them up, right? They jumped the meritocracy. And this rubbed the wrong way to an organization called Fede Cámaras, okay? Which is a chamber of commerce. This rubbed the wrong way. Yeah. Now, remember, PDVSA, biggest oil company at that time, and right now this time, they had influence over a lot of things happening in Venezuela. Now, we cannot deny that. So what happens is that these people really didn't like that, right? And they started to influence politicians and coming out and saying, this guy is out of control, right? This guy's out of control. We got to stop him. We got to stop him. But this was started by the people in PDVSA, not by the people itself, but by the people in PDVSA, okay? Now they started. Now they knew some generals. The generals, they talked to the generals and say, we need to stop this guy. We need to stop this guy somehow. We're gonna have a march, right? So they say, well, we know we're gonna have a march, and it's gonna be against this new guy that's trying to take over the meritocracy happening in PDVSA, right? The march happened, and then you have this 48 hours of confusion. Okay, there's a lot happening there. There's a lot happening. Okay, so where do we start? We have a march happening. The march gets diverted to the presidential palace, to the assembly, and more people start joining. The march goes longer than they thought it was going to be. I mean, the march, you see pictures of it. It's just crazy, right? It was televised. Everybody was watching. I was watching it. It was happening in Caracas, and so they get to the assembly. During the march, some of the generals go up and say, they rebel against the government. And they say, this guy's crazy. I agree. So you have all these. So again, picture it, right? We have these very rich people on the top with a lot of power. You have these very high-end generals rebelling against the government. And then you have this march happening in the same day, right? The march gets diverted, and then at some point in the day, one of the high generals in Chavez comes up and say, Chavez has resigned. Okay, this happens. You can look it up. Chavez has resigned. People are like, wow, Chavez has resigned. I saw that on TV. I was like, what the heck? I was happy. Again, I don't understand it. At that point, I didn't understand anything was happening in politics, but I don't know. I was happy. People were celebrating. Chavez has resigned. He's now in Fortuna, which is a prison near in Caracas, one of the biggest prisons there. So what happened historically, if you see, so let's step back to today, right? What happened historically is that people say that during his time in prison, he had an agreement with this general that he was given the option to leave the country, right, and peacefully, and some other generals said, no, we want to try him in, we're going to take him to court, all right, before he leaves the country, we want to keep him here. So Chavez, according to what people, the historians say, this is what the most accurate information I had, is that he didn't like the idea of staying in Venezuela being tried. He wanted to leave peacefully. So what happens is that the letter of resignation never got signed, even though the resignation was actually announced. So this is what they call vacuum of power, right? And this is what the Supreme Court actually called it, the vacuum, vacuum of power. So what happened next was the most incredible fuck up by the opposition, in the last 20 years. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they did. They put the head of the Chamber of Commerce, which was one of the guys heading this manifestation, right? They signed him in live on camera on TV. They signed him in on the presidential palace, not on the assembly, where you're supposed to actually, in the president. So this thing from the start was just shady, right? This guy comes in and he dissolves the assembly. He takes down he basically dissolves the assembly, dissolves the governorships, okay, and puts the different people on higher rankings and ministries, right? He changes the name of the country.
Carmona.
Yeah, Carmona. I mean, this guy is just unbelievable. So he does all these things, right? And then what happened is that the people that he appointed to ministries were not even the people in the opposition that were organizing the protests. Okay, so it was a coup against Chavez and a coup against the opposition. This was bad. Next day, right? You see him, Carmona, again from the assembly taking the pledge of office. It was too late. The guy came in unconstitutionally, did things out of nowhere. I mean, if you want a guy with power on the top, there's your guy, okay? you want somebody that goes crazy by himself? There's Carmona. So since Chavez never resigned, then some of the military that was with Chavez actually went to the palace, apprehended Carmona, brought Chavez in, and basically everything was back to normal. Now, this thing is so confusing because some people say, well, maybe it was a play by Chavez. Maybe Chavez, this whole time, Chavez was planning this to get people to come out and actually just slash them right there. And then some people say, well, it actually didn't go well because Carmona actually fucked everything up, right? That's the main thing. There's way more. We can talk about 2002 for hours, but I'm just going to leave it there for now for the sake of time.
So yeah, maybe if depending on how long, because I'm committed to doing this series, we could do a whole one day if I do some research and the coup. But essentially, this is kind of evidence that about Chavez wrecking Venezuela, but by no means was his opposition a bunch of competent. It's sort of like what's going on here right now. Yeah. That there's a president that a lot of people hate. The opposition to him is run by a bunch of incompetent buffoons, you could say it. That's kind of been a flaw in Venezuela since Chavez came to power, and obviously since he passed away. You have Maduro issue. Can you speak a little bit about opposition today? We have this, I think it's the MAU Day, MUD, English, and they won the assembly elections, I think was it 2014, 2015? Basically, some people thought this was the beginning of the end. Maduro. Can you about how Maduro has kind of outmaneuvered them?
All right. So the opposition is an interesting topic because It's a very diverse group of people, all right? But what happens is you got, for example, let's just talk about the opposition today, right? So you got the majority leader in the assembly, Julio Borges, right? This guy is the shittiest guy you can ever see in your life. I mean, you see him talking, you see him how he leads. I mean, this guy has no personality. It's just, you know, if you're looking for a, you know, if Maduro wanted to win again, he will nominate Borges. He's such a, it's just this guy. Okay. But anyways, Borges was very much involved in the coup of 2002. Okay. He was one of the heads. So you have the cadaver, right, coming from the horrible times of the opposition, leading the opposition today. I mean, it's just like, who advises these people? I mean, he's just unbelievable, right? So we have that guy there, Capriles Radonsky, right, which was the last opposition candidate. This guy, where to begin? He was also involved in the coup of 2002, and he was the one who was tasked to go to the embassy of Cuba and find the vice president that was basically toppled that day, right? And he actually went to the embassy and demanded the embassy to release him. I mean, there is international laws on the embassies about you know, how do you call that, when you have asylum, you know, asylum laws, international laws, that you cannot do that. You cannot just go to a cemetery, go inside and say, oh, where's, you know, I'm looking for this guy. Come on, just release him. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So you ask this guy today about that, and he says like, well, I mean, I didn't know. I just follow orders. I mean, come on, man. These people have so many you know, bodies on their campaign. It's just unbelievable. But anyways, Capriles is somewhat okay. He mobilizing. He mobilized a lot of people, and he lost by less than 2% against Maduro. I forgot what the exact name is. So he did pretty well. He did mobilize people. So I want to give him credit for that. Credit for credit is due. So that's where Capriles. I mean, he walked through Venezuela. His campaign was insane. I mean, if you see videos of his campaign, much respect. I mean, the guy just went all out. Okay. You have other people. You have the other guy, Leopoldo Lopez. All right. So Leopoldo Lopez is an interesting guy because he has been, let's say, prosecuted in a way from the government for many years.
He was just released house arrest, I think.
Right, house arrest. That guy, right? So he's been involved in politics for a long, long time. He was the leader of assembly at some point. He was deputy. He was governor. You know, he held a lot of political positions. He had a lot of experience in politics. But the thing about him is that when Chavez was alive, they had governors elections. They actually inhabilitated him, and he went to trial after that, and he won the trial. So they inhabilitated him as a political move. So when you have a guy that the government sees as a menace, you pay attention, right? You know, they didn't inhabilitate Enrique Capriles. They haven't done anything to Borges, which is very, very, very suspicious to me. You know, how come this guy has not been prosecuted politically? So, right, but you guys, yeah.
In politics, and you know, I come from, you know, I believe in libertarianism, and we have kind of, you know, it's the best label I can give, but a lot of times when we have a politician that we think is completely fake, we call them controlled opposition. Yeah. You know, basically a guy who pretends he's going against the establishment, but is really cooperating with them. So that's kind of the analogy that you're giving to Borges. But
Borges mainly. But anyways, let's go back to Lopez, right? Something interesting that happened for 2014, I think it was, when Lopez and Maria Corina Machado, which is another opposition leader, and some other ones, Ledesma, who was he was the governor of the district capital, and other people, they actually called for protests. I think it was in 2014. I want to say 2014. Yeah, 2014. Okay, very similar to the protests we're seeing today. Okay, now That was when they went out to march. Some people got shot, and there was some looting. There was some crazy things happening in some of the governmental offices, where a small group of people, violent as always, threw rocks at these government buildings, and you had, I mean, I could talk about hours about what happened that day. But anyways, the government charged him with crime by association. The fact that some people got killed during the march, it was his responsibility. Even though if you look at his call, he was very specific about what the march was about. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Enrique Capriles was not for this march. He said that this thing, it was gonna blow up. This is not a good idea. We should not do this. Basically, what we call in Venezuela un paño mojado, which is a towel with cold water. Let's put towel and cold water on this thing. Forget about it. All right. So that's another thing that I saw on Capriles. I said, like, why is this guy just just calling for, yeah, no, don't do it. So anyways, he goes to jail, right? Fast forward 2 years, we have this march, and you have the heads of the guys that were against Lopez march heading this. Obviously, everybody now is with it, but the guys that started it were some of the guys were actually opposed to Lopez march. Okay, now they have these guys here and say, yeah, we should go to march every day. Yes, 100 days, go for it. What's happening? I mean, these people are, how do we follow this? I mean, where do we go? What's the what's the north here? What are we doing? There are real problems. There are real reasons to march. There are real reasons to protest. There is legitimate reasons to be against the government. But if these people are just like back and forth, I mean, how? We can't. I mean, and with Borges on the top, it's just it's very problematic.
Yeah, like seeing a common theme here where the government, if there's a lot of flaws with them in terms of managing the country, but they do have to some degree unity and cohesion, and obviously the help of their foreign allies, Cuba and Iran, and which I discussed a little more with Gabriel last week. But let's talk a little about the media in Venezuela. And it might sound kind of stupid, but I started watching Telesur, the Spanish version, and I had to say I was bizarrely entertained by the fact that they were, with everything that's going on in their own country, Venezuela, sent a reporter to the Spanish-Moroccan border. And she was ration of probably a couple dozen Spanish left-wing protesters that were trying to get some migrants in from Africa, and she was acting as if that was like the story of the day. And these were migrants from Burkina Faso, one of the countries in Africa that's not at war. Then they did another story about protests against their new president. So let me ask you, from your personal, and I know you've been living in the U.S. for a little while, watch that channel and trust it as news in Venezuela, or is it kind of a little bit of a joke?
Sure. I'm sure people watch it. Before we go into it, I just want to close up on the opposition situation. There are people, deputies are actually good on the opposition. There are actually people that are actually for the people, are not, personal interests. So I don't want to give the idea that, all the opposition is bad. I'm just saying that some of the leaders are a little problematic. Anyways, going back to the TV station. Yeah, sure. They are, yeah, I've seen people that watch it. People watch it. Again, in my circle of friends and family, we don't see a lot of Chavistas, all right? So I can't speak for that, but I'm sure people watch it. I'm sure people, share the articles and believe in that. Why not?
I think what was like really what stood out for me, and we don't. I mean, obviously, you've lived in America and you see how our media. So yeah. It's not like we can make fun of any other country now, but I remember watching the ads that they had on, and they were all about how stand against Yankee imperialismo and all that, and the ads sound like the news, like an ad, and it was very and
Yeah.
you know, and I've been following this story for a while. I haven't been making videos for very long, but was a very good independent media in Venezuela. And would you say that for people who do want to have like balanced coverage, or not even balanced, but at least authentic coverage of what's going on, how do you think people are getting that if they're living in the country, if they can
Well,
even get it?
if you look at the most watched channels, you can find this actually. They did a poll into what are the most watched channels in Venezuela. Some of the top are Global Vision, which is also problematic. We can talk about it. But there is also one called Tele. What's the name of that? It has a shoot. I have a name, but it has a
Telemundo?
no. It has a symbol of a circle, a red circle with a slash. I forgot what the name is. Shoot. Okay. Anyways, these two channels are the most watched in Venezuela. In Venezuela, but if people want to get uh, coverage on Venezuela, you got to remember that there's the polarization of news have been going on since the early 2000s. Okay, and more after what happens in 2002. And the media was a big had a big role in it. Again, like I said, we can talk about hours about what happened in 2002. But one of the things that really shook the media was what happened when Venevisión did on what happened in Puente Llaguno, which was a bridge where a guy was firing at something. Okay, and that was one of the main things that the opposition used to escalate the coup. By the way, but anyways, the media in the past has been obviously privately owned, most of them. We've always had national media. Venezuelan Televisión has always been national media. But they became more militarist, more, I guess, I don't know how to say it. It's more propagandistic with Chavez, right? They became more socialist oriented and all this propaganda driven, educational programs and all these things. But anyways, what I will say to people that want to get a balanced situation, I think Global Vision is a good one. They have, even though most of their shares are owned by somebody in government, I forgot who it was. They actually do not too bad.
So this is Global Vision.
Yeah, I think they are pro-government. I think they are pro-government, and they still do pro-government things, and people stop watching it after a while. But they are okay. I want to say they are okay within everything what's happening. So Global Vision. You have so. Anyways, what I would say is that watch Global Vision. NTN 24 is a Colombian channel that is very very pro-opposition, and then you have Telesur. So I would say people just have to have their own opinions and make their own opinions and watch all the channels.
It's good that we're kind of like on the same page with that, because it's almost, that's a problem that we're having all over the world. Every single country, at least internally, people are trying to struggle to find reliable reporting, and you can see what's happening right now with the press and President Trump, that there's a mutual they're just fighting, let's just call it what it is. Is it kind of, because I remember Chavez, I had this, there's this girl that was at my school when I went to college. She was from Venezuela, and I used to ask her, do you watch Allo Presidente with Hugo Chavez? And her face just froze like she was going to murder me. And she said, this is basically like listening to Hitler speak or something for her, because her family comes from that background where Chavez ruined everything.
Yeah, my family comes from that background too, but I'm an adult.
Yeah,
I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, this was but Some people are now saying here that it's good that our president communicates directly with people. We don't have to,
Yeah.
listen through the media. Do you think, at least to his credit, and for the record, I know what Chavez did to the economy and to what people's lives, but do you think it was a move that people liked, that he started going directly to communicating directly through the TV? Was it a good idea on his part?
I think so. I think so. Again, I'm not. I'm ardently against Chavez. I'm ardently against his programs. But you have to look at it from his perspective, right? I want to win elections. I want to be in power, and I want to be relatable, right? As a politician, what best thing than to have a Sunday show where I can talk to people, talk to my ministers? It's brilliant. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think, like, that's kind of, I try to look for people that are able to, even though everybody's affected, but especially, like, in Venezuela, there's nobody who's not affected by the news. But
yeah,
everybody knows that, or at least I think, even the people that oppose Chavez, they know that he came to power for a reason, because of the neglect of the years before that. But with this, the way that the media is working right now in the United States, we don't hear a lot of coverage of it. I don't think in Europe they really pay attention to it, because they're going through when there's a monumental event. I think Venezuela right now, if you looked at it, is like it's like a sequel to the fall of the Berlin Wall for me.
I think so too. I
talked to people. I said this to Gabriel last week. I said, people ask me why I pay attention so much to this story when, who cares? There's not like a lot of Venezuelans here. There's not, and I say, beyond, because it's not like I pay attention to every refugee crisis. There are a lot of refugee crises we don't talk about here in the U.S. anyway. From China, for example, there's tons of refugees, but we're talking about a story where a country basically took its best resources in terms of people and obviously the mineral wealth, the dam I talked about with Gabriel, and it just wrecked everything, and it's become kind of a weird display of how bad can it get? I mean, how much worse can it get? And yet, and this is kind of more of an interest of mine, we have Telesur, which is a country, they have an English channel, and they're able to broadcast into the United States in the absence of real coverage here. And it's kind of funny, they were making fun of our election process here. A couple of days ago, they said, for example, that there is all this voter suppression here in the United States. I watched one of their reporters, Abby Martin, is now in.
Yeah, I watched it too.
We have me and this other friend of mine, who is, I'm actually Jewish. I was in the Israeli army, and he's talking about how Venezuela covers Israel, or this Abby Martin covers Israel, and he's like, yeah, it's such a problem. Then I point him to how they cover Venezuela over there, and he's like, well, I mean, what difference does it make? They can, and I say, if we're really going to talk about, some people, I think they just have a selective attention span, just like people talk about selective memory, and
yeah. So so yeah, they have limited attention span, but again, we gotta be fair, I guess. I think that's find the best word for that. There is, as I said, I think we have to train ourselves into have a better sense of critical thinking, okay? And a better sense of actually be a little, speculative, or just questioning. We need to train that questioning muscle and that thing. So anyways, when we talk about somebody like Abby Martin and some people in Telesur, how their things, I mean, I saw all the reports in Venezuela. She missed. She could have done a history. She could have opened a history book, an economics book, and do a great reporting on on what have been historically the results of Chavismo, right? But no, it's just this little pockets of things that she talked about, and you know, it's just completely crazy. But then if you talk about other reports that she's done, I like all the reports she's done, you know, on other things like the world economy and you know, foreign policy. I think those are great. I think those are actually accurate.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about this show called Empire Files, which is popular. I know people who watch it and they love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can. So yeah, she does have a lot of reporting that's, you know, abroad that people do like. So go on.
Yeah. So you know, you have to have your own critical thinking and say, okay, I can differentiate good reporting from bad reporting. You know, and I can say, you know, I can actually tear down. I mean, I could spend a whole video tearing down every single one of those videos that she made in Venezuela. Some of those things were actually pretty good. Some of those, most of it was actually completely out of place. It's just incredible. But anyways, the thing is, yeah. So you know, like you're saying, yeah, people have thoughts, but what we gotta do is, I guess, what I try to do, I guess, when I share my things on Facebook or you want to talk to people, is that I try to bring that critical thinking method or that questioning thing of you know, don't get too emotional attached, you know, and question everybody, even the ones you know, even the ones you trust, you know. So yeah, that's what people have to do. So whatever you watch, just question what you see, and you know, and you know, question it. Just question it.
So this is like this is a central problem that I think I'm joining now what you guys have been dealing with for a long time, which is how do we, as people that are interested in what's going on, first of all, get more attention for it. I mean, there's people here in the United States, they will, on any given topic, let's say in you know, mansplaining, womansplaining, manspreading, they will go on the internet and start this massive, you know, drive. You know, you got to stop manspreading and whatever. And meanwhile, I mean, if we did that, if we acted like these, you know, histrionic basket cases, I'm assuming some people would pay attention. But, you know, I guess you and I and the other people that I've talked to, we're kind of on the same page here. We want like an approach that will, you know, help people, obviously, give the proper attention, not tell lies. What do you think is the best way to spread awareness on this? I've suggested sharing more of this information with, you know, the non Venezuelan community, probably like the regular English, you know, English forums that we have here. But I mean, could you give some maybe experience as to how you're dealing with this, if you have anything, in terms of dealing with neighbors that talk about it, or
just you know, living in a polarized country for, you know, 11 years of my life, well, more, 17 years of my life. I can tell you this, that I've changed a lot the way I approach people, you know. Before, you know, again, you know, I cannot speak for people that live there. You know, I'm speaking from my experience and the time I was there. I respect people that, you know, have other opinions. So, you know, don't take this as a general Venezuelan opinion, but as myself. So what has happened is like there's a lot of emotional tension, you know, and I'll take the example of Venezuela to answer your question, right? In a situation where there's a lot of polarization, way more than here. Here is a joke, believe me. Like Trump will say,
yeah, you're like, you guys are amateurs, Americans.
Believe me.
Yeah.
Believe me, you're amateurs at polarization. You want to see a polarized society? You have no idea. No idea. Oh, all the Democrats voted against it. Oh, I guess we're polarized. Give me a break. Okay. So anyways, let's go back to Venezuela. I'll give you a polarization. So when you have people with completely different worldviews, okay, because one of the things that has done that Chavismo has been very effective in is just basically having this alternative education system where you forget everything about what happened before Chavez, and then you have all these great things that happened in the revolution, right? And never taking a historical perspective, because obviously it was capitalistic before, so you don't want to learn about capitalism, right? So anyways, having this situation where you have people in completely different environments, the best thing to do is to never try to be right. Never try to be right, and never try to come in with facts or with figures or with like, oh, you saw what happened yesterday. So never try to be right, and never try to convince anybody. All right. what I would say, the best method I see, the most honest method, is to ask questions about what they think, and then make a suggestion, so that they actually, if they want to, they can change their mind. But time and time again, I see this happening in Facebook and in social situations where I've been to with friends, is that people come in with an idea, and it's just nothing can change that idea, and then I'm gonna get you to think that way, you know. So a libertarian comes in and says like, "Oh, come on, free market makes sense. Come on, you know." And then you see a socialist guy, "But come on, like, you know, socialism." You never get anywhere. You're gonna get mad. He's gonna get mad. Everybody's gonna go home with like, you know, anger in their. So that's not the idea. So yeah, approach people like that. Ask questions. I always ask questions. I have some communist friends in my Facebook, and I love talking to them. I love asking questions and stuff. So yeah, I ask questions. Be interested in what they have to say, and then suggest something.
I'd like to hear from some of them if you know
Sure.
maybe down the line. I mean, I can't do this every day, but
Yeah.
this is kind of, you know, I was you know, obviously last year, this everything we're doing right now, I wasn't doing this last year because, you know, for a long time I wasn't active in politics at all. It was kind of, it looked like a joke because it has been a joke, and then people in this country started to you know, they latched on to these populist candidates, Trump and Sanders. And then, you know, I kind of got, because I was very much personally opposed to Bernie Sanders. I was not a Donald Trump supporter, but I was more of, you know, believing in, you know, the way that I was a Ron Paul supporter in the past. And I did get into these heated arguments just like you're talking about. And since then, because, you know, there's no election to fight right now yet. So I'm trying to tell people, forget waiting for an election and fighting elections. The issues that the elections did not solve are, you know, our healthcare system. So I put out probably, you know, at least twice a week a video on, I call it the ACA Today, about Obamacare, and I lay out, you know, how it, in my opinion, it's a policy that's bad for progressives and bad for people of the free market capitalist system. And I think that's the best contribution I can make. But with Venezuela,
Yeah.
we're talking about really a binary issue. Either you think that the government is doing okay and these people are out in the streets making a real, you know, a jamboree out of nothing, or you really, you know, I think as you know, he's really screwed everything up as bad as it can be. And what I think is being missed here is that Venezuela does affect the entire economy of the Western Hemisphere and
Yeah.
probably beyond that. And we discussed it a lot with my other guests. But why do you think, and beyond your personal experience, why do you think Americans should be concerned about Venezuela? I could bring up one reason after if you miss it, but I mean, why do you think Americans should think that this is a real issue for our country?
All right. So I mean, the obvious one is the oil commerce that, you know, that we have between the. I think that's the biggest link we have with the U.S. Right. The oil exports and imports and on all these things. So if you want to have a stable oil economy, you better, you know, better at least be friends or have a stable Venezuela happening, right? Venezuela has become, and this is a chapter I'm reading right now in this book called the Revolution in Venezuela, and this was made by different scholars and different economists. Actually, some of economists from here, and it brings all these facts and figures.
Maybe we could share a link at the end.
Huh?
Share a link at the end. So
sure. So anyways, if we talk about the influence on the Venezuela had on the South American continent, which obviously is one of the primary economic partners of the U.S., you can see a history of friendships between different countries and trade agreements that they've had, and there's a tendency ever since Chavez got in. There's a tendency for South America to become more independent from the U.S. Okay, and for different reasons. But there have been a number of economic policies thrown into the South American Union that started with Chavez, and that's something that we need to acknowledge. And what ended up happening is that these countries are starting to do policies that are not necessarily always in the best interest of the United States, but are in the best interest of them. And if the United States does not, or people in the United States does not take Venezuela as an example to demand from the government that their policies that historically have affected the continent do not stop, or if they become more hawkish, if they become more economic, sanctioning thinking here and there, that you can see a retaliation of a continent that in the past 20 years is more united than before, and you see a lot of it. So yeah, I think it's very important to know about Venezuela because a lot of the economy happening in South America is intentionally linked with the United States.
Yeah, and I think like this is one of the areas where I don't have as many arguments with the left as I do with the right. I had before Venezuela became an issue, there was Chile and Guatemala. Those were countries where our foreign intelligence service, the CIA, overthrew governments in order to prevent communist infiltration. That was during the Cold War. But we can't just pretend as if, oh, we did in the Cold War, you guys should just let it go like a mulligan in golf. It doesn't, people's lives get affected.
Look, I'll tell you this, Ramon. One of the main reasons Chavismo is so strong is because of those things.
Right.
We can talk about what they talk about on their educational programs, and they mention Chile, and they mention Guatemala, and they mention Nicaragua, and they say, hey, see, this is what the opposition is doing. Come on, what are you doing with them? Come with us. We are the real Venezuelans. We are the real patriots here. So
that's kind of why I see this as all this stuff where we're seeing, I think Donald Trump, not him, but the Senate was trying to pass sanctions this week, and I said, why do you even need sanctions? Just kind of muddies the waters. All you have to do, they did this themselves, and you're trying to give them an excuse why they, what's going on is that America, the neoconservative, and among a lot of people that know me, that claim that they're conservatives, and in my opinion, they're just people who can't mind their own business. And it's been that policy for probably over 100 years. We had the banana wars that we called them in America, where we were sending our Marines into countries with no relationship to communism. It's had to do with protecting corporate interests in those countries, and they talk about it on the Venezuelan media.
Yeah,
there's no argument against that. It's the truth.
You can't argue against it. By the way, we can have a whole conversation on Guatemala. I read a great book called Bitter Fruit that I think. You read it?
Yeah, a long time ago. Long time ago.
Huge. Yeah. Huge. But yeah, that's one of the reasons, and that's what the libertarian part of part of the libertarian policy I agree with, which is like, hey man, just don't deal with them. Just what are you doing? they just have good commerce and have nice relationships. Why do we have to go into other countries and interfere? Just keep it down.
I think there's a good there's a couple good things I think that are happening. How they'll continue, but between what happened with Brexit, I believe, is that a lot of people on the left and the right realize that you cannot have just everything managed at the top, like in the European Union. in Venezuela, obviously on top, but we're seeing, you know, our people approach things very differently. If I'm going to talk to somebody who is about police brutality and all of that, I can't go and say, yeah, we should let. I have a lot of people that I know that are conservatives and they're for this Blue Lives Matter thing because they're against the movement. And I say that's ridiculous. You can't just say that you're always for. You're against somebody that hates the police. So you have to be for yourself first of all, and then for the people around you. So with Venezuela, I see this as a problem where I'm doing this series with people, and you know, I guess I'm kind of freestyling with you right now because we didn't have time with Gabriel, but or with Juan Carlo, but how can we expose this without appearing to be some sort of Yankee pawn? And you know, it's the reality of the situation is that Venezuelans. I was reading this story that I'd seen a few months ago. I was reading again a couple days ago that there's people there that are eating flamingos and anteater. There's no food around. So in terms of the humanitarian situation, are you active in that effort? Do you know ways to help people?
Yeah, I am active on it, but there has been some issues with it. What I would say is that the way to help is that there is, like you said, like you did, you know, reach out to these communities in Facebook or in social media where they organize, and they have connections with different groups on universities where they have drives of food or, you know, medicine, and they usually those even some restaurants, some Venezuelan restaurants have taken up the fact that, oh yeah, you know, we're gonna send some food or some stuff to Venezuela. And usually those people have connections in Venezuela. They can safely get it to Venezuela and safely get it to people that need it. So I will directly relate to people that have family in Venezuela, that live in Venezuela, or and organizations here that are actively sponsoring these events, these drives, these humanitarian reliefs. Yeah, I have sent some. I have supported efforts sending medicine to Venezuela, and some other things. But you know, I've found there's some issues on the ports. If you send the things just by itself, you have to have somebody that go with it, so you can make sure that it's safely passage through the ports. So again, relate with people that live in Venezuela, or with these communities that have people in Venezuela that can connect and get those things to people that need it. So.
And we're not just talking about food. We're talking about this issue with medicine. I think there's a kind of like a black market medicine market there.
Okay. So we can have black market, huge. We can have again a whole hour on black market and why that's a problem. It has been the problem for the longest time. And we can talk about economic we haven't even touched on policy, on Chavez policy. I mean, we talked about different things, but we can talk about policies on the economy that favor and destruct the economy of Venezuela. We can talk about the black market, but essentially, yeah, I mean, I can't put it in simple terms. It's just such a complex issue, but yes, there is a black market, and yes, it is part of the problem right now.
Yeah, the reason I brought up, I mean, again, with Gabriel, I wanted to talk because the black market is I don't know if you can call it a fun topic, but it's an interesting topic because you see kind of how go into it in short, just so people can check out more of it with episode 3. This video is going to be up soon, and it's public anyway. So in Venezuela, the government has been issuing price controls for a lot of commodities. You know, very strict price controls, and basically, story short, they issue a price control on rice. So in some cases, the opposition, or not even opposition, just vendors, they would just basically the packaging or do other little tricks, and they would basically in a different location, you know, they would the real market in Venezuela. There's the shelves are empty.
So I'll tell you. Okay, I'll tell you this. The real economy in Venezuela happening right now is the black market. Okay, all right, and it's not by people that hoard food, and it's not like, you know, sure, I'm sure there's people that hoard food to sell in the black market, but the main one of the main you know, small businesses to say is to actually sell in the black market, including you know, essentials, and also the dollar, right? Setting in you know, doing the dollar exchange. But that, by the way, is driven by this website called Dollar Today, which I have a problem with also. You know, the opposition, and a lot of people opposition, you know, hail this thing as the latest and the greatest exchange, and the most accurate exchange. It's like, I don't even know where that exchange come from. I mean, that exchange, that website goes up and down like crazy, and just I don't know if to trust it. Where is that coming from? Who sets those prices?
Well,
how you know, it's just crazy. So anyways, they use that website and others that are very similar to it to actually create some income for themselves, right? All right. So they have some of the most common ways to make money in Venezuela is to actually have somebody in government that has access to dollars, right? Get it at the official rate, which is very low, and then sell it in the black market. I mean, you make a killing. I mean, you don't even have to have somebody connected. I mean, you go to the airport. I mean, anybody going to Venezuela, just do this. I mean, I don't know. If you're from Venezuela, just do this if you haven't done it. But if you go to the airport, right, and you go before you exit the airport, there's always going to be police officers and military people just kind of guarding the thing. You ask around if they have somebody selling dollars, okay? And I assure you that it's going to be a police guy or a military guy sending you dollars, all right? Why? Because they have access to dollars and they make a killing. It's like 10 times more than the, you know, 10 times more than the original. Rate, yeah. This is a no-brainer for people. It's like, I want to make money. I have some dollars. Let's do it. All right. So that's one side of the black market, and then you have the black market on food and all these things, which I think is nefarious. The fact that it exists. But again, you have to look at it from the whole perspective. You have to really be careful how you approach it, because the thing is that I assure you also that some people that have access to this very important you know, food and medicine, I'm sure they're finding ways to make money out of it because they don't have money, because their minimum wage doesn't account for anything, you know, because they can't buy enough, because their family is in struggle, you know, their kids are not being fed. People get desperate, all right, and they will do things like this. So it's
there is you know, we could talk about and Venezuela should not, I mean, the government should not feel their problem with dollar today, or you know, I understand if you have some questions about how they do it. Well, my you know, what I've seen about Dollar Today, which is a very interesting website. Just like everything here, you could talk about these things for a long time. I'm actually going to try to get a currency guy to talk about it, an American, to talk about what's going on there, because he seems to know that it's called a, well, I'm not going to talk about it until I can get the guy. At the time, but is how the governments will try to set a price. They'll do this artificial price control. They do it all over the world, countries like China, and with this case, in case of Venezuela, the most similar case I've seen was in Zimbabwe, where I think 10 years ago they had the currency exchangers, just like what you're talking about. There was a limited distribution of foreign cash reserves. They didn't want, because the Zimbabwean currency was basically tanking. So there were these black markets that were literally like, open air markets where people would sell dollars and other currencies. And the government, what they did, they brought in their thugs, and they had this campaign where they just called the Morobatsvuna, I think it's called. I don't know how it's pronounced, some word in Shona. But they went in there, they're like, yeah, so we beat these dollar dealers up, the problem's solved, right? Not really, because the government people still want to sell their dollars. So it just went somewhere else, and somebody else was doing it. And that's kind of the way I see. And North Korea actually had an issue like this a couple years ago, where they gave a few people this access to foreign products. I think currency wasn't really the issue, there was products. And I kind of see this as, this is just a way that humanity behaves. People want something. We could say the same thing about gambling, about prostitution. It's not something we can, say we're happy about, but it's just people want this thing, and then they're like, well, you can't play blackjack out in the open air. Well, people will do it. People play dice games in alleys. It's the way it is in life, and I don't know. I mean, we could keep talking about this, but I think what we've been today with Carlos, and I'm, if you want, we could talk off air a little more, but and I'd be glad to have you back again, because I'm not planning to stop doing this anytime soon. Is that Venezuela is a country where we're talking about human nature is really being displayed live all the time, where you have a government that is trying to box people in with what it says is good for them, and yet the real desires of people, the black market, freedom of information, freedom to assemble, freedom to associate with other people, those are the things that we take for granted here. A free press, the freedom to buy whatever you want, and we complain here in America about being able to buy marijuana or cigarettes for a lower sales tax, or gasoline without crazy taxes. And over there, you're talking about people that, in many cases, or if there is, it's at a massively inflated price. So the absence of competent government, there's also an absence of competent opposition. So, there's a lot of things you could say, make it an ideological quest, talk about, liberating the country. But, what has to be talked about is how important it is for people to be able to associate freely and basically have freedom of expression, have a country that people can make their own choices. And I think that is something that Chavez and Maduro have taken away from the people there. And hopefully tomorrow, this referendum that we were talking about at the beginning, it will not be the complete end of it, because if it is, then we really are talking about humanitarian tragedy that I think will get much, much worse.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is Carlos Cordova, and he is our third Testigo Venezuela, the witness to what's going on there. And hopefully, I'm hoping that there's going to be positive news this week, but,
So let me mention something, because we're going to talk about the assembly happening tomorrow. But just to quickly kind of close the loop here. Tomorrow there's going to be an election about who's going to write the Constitution, or who's going to be in the position to write the Constitution. And then there's going to be another election later in the year to approve or disapprove of the results of that Constituent Assembly. Okay, so if it happens tomorrow, there's still a chance of voting it down. But again, that's another topic we can talk about for half an hour. But
we'll probably get the chance.
We'll see. All right. Good stuff.
I'll talk to you a little more off And
okay, sure.
everybody else, please tune in to this episode, episode 4, and the other 3 before it. And if you want to be a part of Testigo, Venezuela, maybe you think Maduro is doing great, or you have a different aspect to talk about. We never talked about the church. We haven't talked about anything that has to do with the medical system there. I have no problem having you guys, all these guests here that I've talked to. I mean, until now, they're willing to come back. But I don't care how many people I have and how much time I have to spend on it. I mean, I'm not going to go for 3 hours because my mouth will dry out. But you know, this is going to continue to be an issue even if Maduro falls. You know, that's about it for tonight. So what's your message to the people of Venezuela?
There's still time, so keep it up. There's still time.
All right. So until later, this is Ramon. This is Bold Like a Leopard, and this is Testigo, Venezuela. And have a great night.